Like I said, my name is Caitie. I'll be instructing tonight, and we are going to talk about porches and decks. So I am starting with a disclaimer because this is a bit more complicated of a task than some of our other workshops like painting or tiling. And basically, this is because it does require being in line with building codes. So this presentation is meant to be like a starting point. If you don't know anything about it, or you just want to get some information and figure out if a deck is something you can do or should hire out, then you are in the right place. Or even if you just want to understand what's going on within your own deck or how to maintain your deck, anything like that. We'll talk about all of that tonight, but you do, have to have a good understanding of the code if you are going to build it yourself, which this is totally possible. And I have all the resources that you should need in here, but I just want to put it out there. You're not going to be an expert from nothing to building decks full time for this PowerPoint, but we'll get everybody started tonight. So what I'm planning to cover is kind of start to finish what's going on with your deck, from planning out your project, figuring out what questions you have and how to answer them, the basic steps of building decks, which of course this is going to be, different from project to project. And then within those steps, I'm going to try to cover the biggest building code requirements. There's a ton of stuff in the code, but this is like the key things, what people are looking for, what inspectors are looking for to make sure that your decks are safe. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between material you can use for your decks, whether that's wood or synthetic material. And then we'll go into deck maintenance and a little bit about staining. And this is especially great for just making sure that you are doing everything you need to be doing at home. Okay. Okay, so to start off, whenever we're looking at a deck or a porch, any kind of big project, we want to start in the planning phases before we just start ripping stuff out or start putting anything together. So starting off with the question of, do we need a permit? And the short answer is yes. There are some exemptions with which I've listed. If it's a small deck, less than 200 square feet, or less than 30 inches above grade, meaning it's pretty close to the ground, you might not need a permit. And if it's not attached to the house, or if it doesn't serve as an exterior door, meaning, you're not requiring crossing this deck in order to exit your house. So maybe it's just like off of the side of your house and you just sit out there on chairs, something like that. There are exemptions, but most of the time you are going to fall within one of those categories. So you probably need a deck or a permit, I'm sorry. And you can figure that out just looking online. So, in Pierce County, I put the link over here for the permit application. So you can actually just go to that link, click on it, and as you're going through the menu, it's going to let you know, like, yeah, you need a permit for this, or no, you don't, based on your project. And then, assuming you do need a permit, you'll have to get the necessary paperwork in order, which is mostly just the site plan. I mean, there's some other stuff too. They're going to want information about your house and, obviously what you're planning to do, but the site plan is going to take into consideration, okay, this is the house you're starting with. This is what's already existing here. Maybe you have an existing porch, maybe you don't. And then this is your proposed plan. So you will need to come up with a plan, which a contractor can do. If you're working with a contractor, they can submit the plan and the permit and all of that. If you're feeling ambitious and you want to try it yourself, I did put a link down here in this red box to a Lowe's deck designer, which I actually just found for this, doing research for this presentation here, and it's a really cool tool. So on the Lowe's website, they have like a kind of software, and you can essentially map out what your deck is going to look like. So you can put the house that you already have, you can play with the size and shape of your deck, you can change out the materials. And this is really cool because at the end, let's say you play around with this, you reach the look and the size and everything that you want, they will actually work up a tool list or a material list, I'm sorry. So they'll tell you how much of everything you need and it'll estimate a cost. So this is a really cool tool to use to get an idea of like, okay, this is way over my budget. I'm gonna have to change the size or the shape or something. And with that material list, that takes out a lot of the guesswork in our heads of like, okay, how many deck boards do I need? All of that is already gonna be figured out. And you can take these plans or the material list into Lowe's and hand it to them and they can pull it for you, or you can order ahead of time and you don't have to go through all of the, back work of figuring it out on the website or picking up 200 deck boards in the store and bringing it back and forth to your house. So this is a great way to save some work on your end. And then on the permit application website, there is a quiz to help you figure out and work through whether you can draw up the site plans or whether you should get a professional to do it. And that basically is, you would need some pencil, and it tells you all of this on there, but pencil, ruler, you're going to have to like draw out your deck with all the information that they're requiring, which is also listed on here. But there's a quiz to help you figure out if that's right for you or if you should hire that. So I know that's kind of a lot of information already on the first slide, but any questions on this, feel free to jump in or chat, or I'll keep rolling too. And a lot of this, I'm kind of speaking generally because I'm not sure where everybody's from, but I'm in North Carolina. I know you guys are probably in Pierce County, but the codes and permit applications do work different from place to place, but you can just Google it for wherever you are, what county or city you're in, and you should be able to find the similar link to this that I put on here. Okay, so let's say we went ahead, we got our permit approved, we got our building permit, so we can go ahead and get started. We are going to start first and foremost with our footings, right? So a footing is basically the support, which is concrete, the concrete support that is going to hold up all of the framing of our porch and support the load. So we can't just put a 4x4 post directly into the dirt because it's going to sink over time, especially if we're using, a lot of lumber. We're planning to have people on our deck. We want to make sure that we get our project started off on the right foot. So, oh, no pun intended, but on the right foot. So I put 3 different options. These are probably the most common. There's other other ways you can do it, but this is definitely the most common, especially if you are doing it yourself. So I hope everybody can see my mouse. I'm going to kind of use this as a pointer, but there's basically 3 options. This first one here is a concrete footing, which is just a hole in the ground, and it uses this tube, which is to help you get the right size footings that you need, which I'll go into more in the next slide about how to figure that out. But these are going to help your footings be really uniform. You can easily get them to the right height by cutting this. This is just like a cardboard tube. You can cut this at the right height so you can really start off from a super level point. And these are the most supportive footing options we have. So this would be a good option for large decks. If you have a lot of weight, like a hot tub, this would be a good option for you. And I'll also go more into this frost line concept in the next slide, but basically the frost line is where your ground freezes and you need to be below that point. So I have a picture showing where that is in different regions, but the frost line, being below the frost line, that does apply for any of these options. So the second option we can do here for footing is called a buried post. And basically this means I'm going to stick my post all the way into the ground and then I'm going to put concrete around it. So this one uses less concrete. It's still very supportive and applies or achieves the same goal as our other footing, but you need more wood, less concrete. So depending on how many footings you need, you can kind of work out a cost difference between the two of these two options. And then I did put this one down here as well. This is the just like a pre-made concrete block. This is the least supportive, but it does provide some extra convenience because you can, you know, you don't need to wait for concrete to dry and stuff like that, but it's not, you know, it's obviously not going deep into the ground. It's not a ton of concrete, so it's not as stable. So this might be an option if you're doing a really small deck, or you don't mind having these blocks placed more frequently. So this can carry a lot less load than this huge concrete tube up here. So I might need 3 times as many of these, but I don't have to mix concrete. I don't have to worry about concrete dust. So this could be an option for you, but they are also a little bit more costly to buy a pre-made block than a bag of concrete. So these are all options. You would just need to figure out you know, which one is going to be the best for you. Okay. So going a little bit more in depth about the footings, as I mentioned before, this concept called frost line, this is basically how deep the ground is freezing. So up here in Washington, I looked in Seattle is like 12 inches, but it looks like Tacoma would be somewhere between this 5 and 10 inches for the frost line. So I'm going to need to be below that line for my concrete, about 6 inches below that line. So if my frost line is 10, then I'm going to be digging a hole that's 16 to pour my concrete 16 inches in total, right? And then you might want to stick it up a little bit so you can get your post in here, but we'll get into all this. Okay, so how do we figure out where our footings need to go, right? This is the first step, but we need to already have our plan worked out. So basically the footing location is going to be determined based on where your beams are going to go, and that is determined by your joist. So this is why the planning in this deck project is super crucial, because you know, once you have it all laid out, then you can do it exactly to plan. And I think some of this will make sense as we get into more of the framing as well. But like I said, you'll get this PowerPoint. So hopefully all of this will just jog your memory of what needs to happen. So I've already worked up my deck plan, and I figured out, you know, I need footings along this string line here and this string line here, and that will be sufficient to support the load of my deck. So as they've done in this picture, they have these pieces of wood here that are basically stakes for the string line to attach into. And what this does is this gives me a really clear straight line, and it gives me a point of where these two are going to meet. So I know the exact point at which my post is going to go, where my beam is going to go, and therefore where my footing is going to go. So you can stake this all out with string lines and make sure it's perfect, exactly how you want it. And you can also check the square, which is what this red dotted line is that says diagonals. So when I say square, I mean that my deck is, you know, a perfect square. So 90 degrees, or a rectangle would also work, right? 90-degree corners. And I can do that by measuring diagonal to diagonal. These two should be the same. If they're not the same, then I might need to adjust my string line over one way or the other to get those numbers to match, right? Okay, and so frequency of the footing, all of that is going to be determined in your code, which I will open this up now, but we're gonna go back to it in a moment. But I put the link on this slide so we can start referring to this section of code. Okay. And then the other thing to point out with our footings is whenever we have pressure treated wood coming into contact with concrete, or I'm sorry, it always needs to be pressure treated wood coming in contact with concrete. So your whole deck is basically going to be pressure treated wood unless you go with a composite material for your decking, but all of this wood needs to be pressure treated, and that is part of code. So if they see anything that's not pressure treated, you're already off to a bad start, right? And then you also need fasteners, which I'll show you a few at various points. But basically a fastener is what's going to help secure wood to wood or wood to concrete. So in this one, we can see that this fastener is going right into my footing, and then my wood sits on top of it and I'm screwed in. So now I know that this post that's supporting my deck, it's not going anywhere. It's staying in this concrete. The concrete is secure in the ground, as we just saw in the last slide. So I'm good to go, right? And that's going to be code 2, checking for all the fasteners, and also that deck, the design your deck tool, this will include all of the fasteners. So if you're using a 4x4 or a 6x6 post, it's going to tell you exactly which one you need. Okay, so I'm going to start moving into the floor system. If your head's spinning already, stick with me here, because I think, especially in this picture, this is going to help put together some of the things we've been talking about, right? So this is essentially what our deck floor system would look like. And I'm just going to go through some terminology on this page, and then we'll get into more of the code and logistics on the next couple slides here. But starting off, anywhere you see one of these posts, you can assume that with this post, there is a footing underneath it. So that's what we just figured out in the last slide. And we got all of our posts with the fasteners into the concrete. And now, once they're in the right spot, then we build the rest of our frame on top of it. So this is a pretty standard porch example. And I'm going to start up here at the house, because this is where the rest of our project is going to start from. So if you see this term ledger board, this is talking about this long board that's running all the way against my house. So this board, obviously I need it secured to the house, but this one is important because it's going to help me figure out the height to build the rest of my deck to. So I want my deck to be finishing right under my doorway usually, right? Assuming I'm going to walk out of the door right onto the decking. So I'm going to subtract down from my, wherever the floor or the door threshold is, just enough that I could fit a deck board. So a deck board is 1.25 inches. I'm going to give myself 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to put my deck board 1.5 inches down from the floor, or the door. Sorry, I keep saying that. From the door. And then I'm going to secure this to the house, which I'll get into in the next slide. But then after that deck board, or this ledger board, everything else is going to attach into that. So all of my joists, which are these ones running, lengthwise of my floor, the joist is primarily what makes up the floor framing. And these are all called field joists because they're in the middle, they're in the field, right? And then this one right here along the edge, this is called my rim band or my rim board or your rim joist, right? Basically, the rim is the outside of your floor system. So I have a rim all the way around the edge, and this is also a code requirement. So I don't want my joist just free hanging on the edge here. I need a board here to catch and secure the ends of these. So that's another code. And then depending on how long my joist span, I'm going to need a beam in the center or at the edge, or however long is required based on how long these are spanning. So, if it's just going out 6 feet, maybe I just need one beam here. If I'm going well past that, I'm going to need additional supports. So that's what this board, this beam in the middle is here. And then there's another beam on this edge as well. Let's see, I might jump over to the code that I just pulled up and see if I can find the correct chart. Okay, so everybody see this screen as well? Make it a little bigger here. Okay. So in this table, this is helping me figure out my joist spacing, and I guess we can go through this a little bit more in the, oh, here we go. This is the one I want. Okay, so this table is telling me my beam span lengths. So this is based on the joist span, which is what we were just talking about a minute ago. If it is depending on how long it is, that's going to tell me in this row up here how big the material is for my beam. So this is a 2x6 and it's saying 2. So that means I need two 2x6s sandwiched together to make my beam, which is, you know, this material or this wood structure in the middle. That's my two 2x6s stuck together. Or if I'm going to be going, wow, 10 to 12 feet, okay, and I want my, let's say I want my joist to be, yeah, the 10 to 12 foot span. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I get all this right. And I'm going to need two 2x10s sandwiched together. And then I'm going to need my beams 8 foot 5 inches apart. So going back to our picture here, that means from here to here, I'm going to have 8 foot 5 inches. And then from this beam to this beam, I would need 8 foot 5 inches. Right, with the two 2x10 sandwiched together. So I'm sorry if that doesn't all make sense. There's a lot of numbers in here, but basically all of these tables are going to tell you the information you need if you just plug in the numbers that you're using, right? Oh, the table's off the screen. Well, I don't know if anybody can see it. If it is off the screen, you should still be able to pull it up from the PowerPoint, hopefully, or somebody can shout out if you're still having trouble seeing it or not.
And as a reminder, we'll send the PowerPoint out afterwards. You'll receive it tomorrow. So you will have this with all of the links and everything in it that you can access.
Yes, and I did, I'm trying to put the, you know, the section of the code on each slide too, so you don't have to search through the whole thing, but hopefully we'll get it straight. Okay. So a little bit more detail about the ledger board, right? This is the one that's attaching into the house right here. This is a pretty big code check thing. So like I said, the ledger, that's what's going into the house, determining the height of your deck. So the way that this gets secured, you can see this guy down here, is with these big lag screws. And there's a little bit more detail about how to attach this, but basically, depending on the length of the lag bolt is going to tell you how many you need into the ledger board to secure it to your house. So you'll have to make sure, again, that you're checking the code on how long and how many you'll need. But these are going to go directly into the house, and you basically just don't want to put them right on the edge of the board, either, you know, the end or the top or bottom. You want to give yourself a couple of inches because otherwise it will split the wood. If it's splitting the wood, it's not really doing its job. So we want to make sure that we're having, you know, having a nice good bite. And then it'll also tell you, you know, how far apart. So if they're 6 inches apart, then you want to make sure you're 6 inches or closer. You can always be closer. So I could put them 5 inches apart, but I can't put them 7 inches apart. So if you're, you know, not measuring exactly every time, make it more than necessary, right? That's always okay. They're not going to fail you on an inspection for having too much structure, too much support, right? Okay, and then our ledger board, it must be a 2x means, you know, like a 2x4, 2 inches thick, and then equal to or greater than the deck joist. So if I'm using a 2x8 for my deck joist, like in this picture up here, then my ledger board has to be a 2x8 or larger. So it could be a 2x10, it could be a 2x12, but it can't be a 2x6, right? Same thing over here. If I have a 2x10 floor joist, then I have to have at least a 2x10 for my ledger. Okay. What else? Another code is it has to have flashing, which is this layer up here. And this means it needs to have a waterproof layer against the house. And then you also want flashing that's going to run from the house and cover that ledger board. So if I do have any rain coming through here, running off my siding, I don't want it dripping right onto my ledger board, which is, as we've discussed, a very important structural component of our deck. So I want it to be able to run off and fall in between my joists. That's no problem. Okay. So that's another code thing on the ledger. And then the other one, which also is part of the joist, but are these joist hangers, which I put a link here to Lowe's or Home Depot, but this is what the hangers look like. And basically we're gonna secure our joist to the ledger board, and then we're also gonna put this hanger up and underneath it, as this picture shows here, and we're gonna nail that into the ledger board and into the joist. So that is really giving me additional support to make sure that that joist, there's no way it falls off, right? Questions on this? Maybe something. How do you protect homes with brick siding? That's a good question. So if you can't, let's see if we can go back a slide. If you can't put on, you know, like a vinyl or metal flashing, they do make like waterproofing. It's not paint, but you paint it on, right? So something that would waterproof it, and then you can still use a piece of flashing like that one that would bend down. You would just maybe need to use like some kind of masonry screw that you could actually screw into your brick. It would definitely be a little bit harder than just going into a wood house, but it's still possible, and might be a Google to get the most specific screws to do that. But I also believe on the design your deck tool. Whoa, just skipped a bunch of lot. The design your deck, you can put in the material of your house too, so that should help you figure out the hardware that you need to be able to do that. Hope that helps.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so carrying on with our floor system and our joist, I guess if we still have any questions about what terms are what, I redefined them up here, but our joists are going across like this. Our beams are what our joists are sitting on top of, right? So the beams are carrying the weight of the joist, and those we already figured out how to determine how far in between those joists. Or how far in between those beams based on the span of my joist, right? Okay, I think that's the chart we already looked at. Let's see. We already talked about the joist hangers. Okay, so I wanted to bring up this cantilever, which basically this term means overhang from a beam. So I know this picture is blurry down here, but I think that's also in. Let me see if I can pull it up in the code. Okay, it's a little bit better. I don't know if you all can see this screen or not. Well, somebody let me know either way. So this is the same picture I have on the slide, but you can see it a little bit better. It's showing us this is our beam here, or yeah, our beam, and it's showing us where we have our post, our supports. And this part right here that says beam span, that's how far I am in between the beams. And then this cantilever is how much it's hanging off, right? So the overhang, and that's going to help me just figure out basically the load capacity. So let me go back to my slide here. So you can't have it like sticking off too much and being unsupported is the gist of it, right? So you need to make sure that you're within a quarter of the total joist span. So if I have a 12-foot joist, a quarter of that would be 3. So I can hang over 3 feet, right? Like this part here, I could be 3 feet over, but I can't be 4 feet over. That's past the load capacity, meaning if I'm stepping on it 4 feet past, then I'm not being supported properly. So that could be potentially pretty dangerous. So we want to make sure we're sticking within that amount. And then I think we already covered this as well, but as you can see in this picture, we would need a rim band on the end of all these joists. So they can't just be free hanging like this. We do need a rim band, and that needs to have 3 nails going into it that are framing nails, which are 3 inches long. This is also listed in the code that you know, I've put the link into already, but it has to be properly nailed off. So let's say you only put 1 nail into everything, the inspector comes by and it's not meeting the nailing requirement, then you could fail on that as well. So this is like, I can kind of geek out about the floor system of the decks, and you know, obviously there's a lot going on in these scenarios, but you know, your simplified floor system, you're essentially making a box, right? You have a ledger board and you have rim bands going all the way around it. That's your box. And then filled in, you need your joist 16 inches on center. So if you can simplify it back down to that after I just threw all this information at you, that's what you're looking for. And the 16 inches on center, if that doesn't quite make sense what that means, that's basically layout terminology, meaning the center of my 2x4 is going to be 16 inches from the center of my next 2x4. And that's going to stay consistent the whole way of my floor. There are different layouts you can do, but 16 is the most common for floor systems. So you should just do that. I don't know why you wouldn't. That's, you know, all of our other material also is based off of this 16-inch on center layout. So if I have an 8-foot board, it's going to land on a 16-inch on center joist, right? If I have a 24-inch board, it's going to land on, or a 24-foot board, whatever, 16-foot board. All of those measurements are consistent so that they land within these layouts. So that's why we want to stick to that, and we can't vary from that. So, you know, what's the big deal if we put something 15 inches on center? Well, if I have it 15 here, but that makes it 17 on the other side, then 1, I'm not properly connected, and 2, it's not going to be consistent with the rest of my material for the decking. So hopefully that makes sense a little bit. And then I also put down here this rule of thumb that I found while putting this PowerPoint together that I thought was helpful. So the rule of thumb for a joist span, so basically how far my joist can span or reach between beams. If I take the depth of my framing member, which is the joist, and add half that number, you can determine basically a rough estimate for how far that deck joist can span. So for example, taking the depth of my framing member, so that's a 2x10, just like the picture here. So I have 10 inches, half of 10 is 5. I add that together to get 15. So roughly my joist can span 15 feet. So you can just get an idea of how far. And then the person who wrote this article had a pretty thorough assessment of everything. And basically this rule of thumb is going to be, it's going to fall well within your code. So you're not going to be like over or underestimating. You're going to be building more adequate than the code is requiring, which is okay, right? We can't do less than the code, but we can go over code. Hopefully that makes sense. This is also assuming a 16-inch on center layout for the joist, like we talked about. Any questions? I'm kind of throwing a lot at you, but oh, you guys can't see anything but the PowerPoint. Okay, well, I'll just stick to using the PowerPoint, and you know, you can scroll through all the code stuff later. Let's see, keep rolling here. Maybe. Okay, so moving on to our decking. So decking must be a 2x6 size material. So you could use an actual 2x6, which is 2 inch or 1.5 inches by 5.5 inches, or you can use a deck board, which is what's in these pictures here. It's just a little bit thinner of a material, but sufficient for decking. It's actually used for decking, and it's a little bit nicer than a 2x6 because it has these kind of radius corners, so it gives your deck a nice, seamless look. So as we're putting our decking in, like you can see in this picture, one common question that, I get asked a lot is, are we going to leave a gap between our boards or not? So like you can see here, should I leave this eighth inch gap or should I not? And an 1/8 inch is the max you can do. So you can't leave 1/4 inch gaps. You can't leave inch gaps between your decking. That's not going to pass code. So if you are going to go with the gap, 1/8 of an inch is the max. And basically, the gaps, you want some gap, you need some gap because that's where all the water runs off of. But the gap is, created because lumber expands and contracts with heat and cold and water and no water. So basically the conditions that you're building in can help you determine if you need a gap or not. So if it's really wet, if you have wet lumber, it's already expanded. So it's not going to get any bigger than that. It's only going to get smaller. So in that case, I would put everything up tight. And then when it dries out, I might have my 1/8 inch gap, right? If I leave a gap while my material is already wet, then it's going to contract and get smaller. And then I have a gap that's too big. Does that kind of make sense? That's kind of the concept we're playing with, right? Same thing for the flip side. If it's really dry outside, then I know, that deck is going to take on water and it's going to expand. Same thing, like if it's cold, it's already in its smallest, most shrunk down size. So it's going to expand in the future, not contract. So that's how you can help figure out if you should leave a gap or not. And the other piece of this is whatever you're doing, you want to be consistent. So if I'm leaving no gaps because that's what I've determined, then I want to make sure my boards are tight up against each other at one end, in the middle, and at the other end. I don't want my deck boards starting to, start going off at an angle, and then I get to my last row and one side fits perfectly and the other side it's hanging off completely, right? That's no good. Same thing if you're using a gap, and I actually didn't know this before, but in this picture, they're using their speed square to create that gap, which I thought that was a pretty handy trick because you can just easily slide this down the deck board as you go. Oh yeah, I just saw a question, which I was going to get to in a second, but somebody asked, should you pilot drill holes first so that your screws won't crack your wood? And you definitely want to do this on the ends of your boards, right? Because that's where it's most likely to split. So, right where I have a deck board ending, like where the speed square is, that's going to be the most likely spot to split it. So I'm going to pilot drill, pre-drill a hole there, so I don't have any issues. And then same thing, if I have like 2 deck boards, they need to meet on a joist. So I can't have a deck board just ending and not being supported by anything. It has to end on a joist, and that is another good spot to pre-drill your holes. Otherwise, you don't have to. You're not likely to split, like if you look in this picture, you're not likely to split it in the middle of this 16-foot board on your joist, but it can be harder to start the screws. So it looks like what this person has done has actually gone along with the screws and just hammered it in. So this is going to help your screw, like it's already started to bite into the wood, and then you can screw it down the rest of the way. That's a super handy way to go about, and it's a lot faster. So now you can just go down and screw in every single screw, which can be kind of tedious because as we're about to see, another code is that you do need to have 2 screws into each deck board on each joist. So if we can see in this picture, the deck boards are already lined up, or her row of screws is lined up with the joist, but there has to be 2 per deck board on every single joist. So she can't just skip this row and do this row and this row. Got to be every single joist, 2 screws into each deck board. And that is something. Okay, so Paul was saying her wood was splitting everywhere without pilot holes. So absolutely, if you're having that happen, it's well worth it to go ahead and do those pilot holes if your wood's fine. And sometimes this will depend on your lumber too. If it's either older lumber or dry lumber, and sometimes you just don't get high quality lumber, which is a bummer, but you can work with it. So if you are having that issue like Paula was, yeah, go ahead and do your pilot holes. If you can get away with just screwing it in, then go for that too. Cool. Let's see. Okay, so this picture I haven't talked about yet, but this is another thing you need to be looking for when you're doing your deck boards, and this is called the cup of the board. So basically, depending on how or what part of the tree that this piece of lumber came for, it's going to have the rings on it, which is actually pretty cool. And it's going to tell you if it's going up or if it's going down. And basically, we want the cup to be, well, I guess let's see if I have a better way of saying this. Okay, this is the frowny face. We want our frowny face going onto our joist like this, so that the water is running off of it and not pooling on my deck board. If it's sitting at like this, my smiley face, then my water is more likely to pool in the deck board. And I don't want that, right? I want the water to run off of it like this. So this one is correct. And I'm looking at this picture, and I think I picked a picture that maybe is not illustrating the same point. So I'll have to flip this out. But this one that's making the frowny face, this is the position I want it in. This smiley face, that's going to have the water pool right on top. So I got to get a different picture on this slide before you send out the email, Tracy. Hopefully that makes sense. I got a bad example in here. Okay, and let's see. We did cover screws or nails. Okay, that's another good question. Should you use screws or should you use nails? I do have this covered again in the deck maintenance, but basically nails are great for shear strength, meaning if I have a nail into something, it's giving me strength in this direction. So it's going to make sure that something doesn't like fall out of a wall, or like the joists don't fall. It's giving me shear strength in this direction. It's not great in this direction. So like holding a board down like this, as I walk over boards, nails can easily pop out because it's just going into a hole like this that can come out. A screw, on the other hand, obviously it has the threads that are helping it screw in and hold something in place. So for a surface like a deck that you're going to be walking on, screws, in my opinion, are a much better option to go for, because it's going to make sure that none of those boards have any give in it, no squeaks, and they're not going to pop out over time. Let's see. I think that's everything I meant to cover on this slide. If there's any questions, let me know.
Did you get the question about the warping and the direction of the wood grain?
Yeah. Let me see. So it warps in the direction of the wood grain. I think I'm understanding what you're asking, but yeah, basically, if there's already a pattern in the wood, it's going to continue that pattern. So if there's already a cup, it's going to cup more extreme in that way. If there's already a frown or a crown, it's going to continue to go in that direction. I think that's kind of what you're asking. So yeah, in this case with the the smiley. If I put water on this, it's only going to make this smile deeper, right? Or if I have this frown and I have water running off of it, that's what I want because, you know, I want it to keep doing it in that direction. I hope that's kind of what you're asking. Yeah, okay, cool. And I have some more pictures of like the deformities, I think, coming up. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so for our deck railings, I haven't spent too much time talking about like actually how to go about the deck railings because, well, one, this is like a huge style point for decks and you can do a lot with the deck railings. So I'm trying to just focus on, you know, what is absolutely required. And then you can figure out later if you want to do any cool patterns or designs. We do that at the Durham affiliate and Habitat, which is kind of fun as long as it's within code, right? So basically, if our deck is 30 inches above grade, it's gonna require handrails that are 36 inches tall. So that's what you see in this picture here. I'm over that 30 inches, so I need a handrail that's 36 inches from the deck. If I have a deck that's really tall, or maybe I would call this a porch, but if I have a deck that's super tall, over this 5 foot 10 inches, it's going to require further handrails or taller handrails, I'm sorry. So just be on the lookout for that. And then I can't have anything larger than 4 inches in between, basically anywhere, in between my pickets or between the deck and the bottom of my rail. So we always use just a 2x4 to help us determine this because it's 3.5 inches. So you're going to be more strict than the code, right? So you can just put a little 2x4 block down on this end, set your railing in on top of it, and be good to go. When you're putting in these pickets, you can put a 2x4 in between them, and that's going to make sure, one, you have even spacing, two, you're within this 4 inches for code. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And then you need a 200-pound concentrated load. And basically, this is ensuring if I run into my deck railing, I don't just fall right over it. So I do have a video in here about what not to do in decks, and they actually demonstrate this. Like they can just shake the whole rail, and it's not really providing any support. So I don't know actually how you test out this 200-pound load, but as long as you're, you know, anchored in, your railing posts are anchored in correctly, you'll be fine with this. It's just more so, I think, making sure you have everything secured as it's supposed to be. And if you followed all the nailing and screw, you know, codes along the way, you're going to be well within this. Oh yeah, what is grade? Sorry, yeah, ground level. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, sorry. Forgot to define that one, but yeah, just off your ground, off your dirt level is great, right? Oh, missed a slide. Okay, and then I did also put in a little bit about stair railing, and stairs are kind of their whole own thing, which I'm not going to get into tonight because we could go on for hours, but I do have a video link in here to a good, you know, talks through how to figure out how to cut your stairs and all of that. So if you do have stairs in your deck, you can look more into that. But basically the stair railing also comes with its own code. So off of the nose of the stair, which is the point of the stair, or you know, like I'll have decking on top of my stair stringer. So this piece right here, this is just the stringer. So that's my pressure treated 2x12 that I'm cutting my steps into. On top of this, I'm going to put my deck boards. So if I have decking down here, then the nose would start from that deck and go up to the rail. So this needs to be within 34 to 38 inches off of the nose. And this should be also consistent from step to step. So assuming I cut my stairs correctly, they should all be within 3/8 of an inch of each other. So I can't have a 7-inch step here and an 8-inch step here. That's not going to work. But I could have a 7 1/8 here and 7 1/4 here, and they're going to give us that leeway. So you do have a range, but basically you can't have, 40 inches here and 30 inches at the bottom of your rail. That's not going to work, right? And then another code here is this 6 inches diameter under the stair rail. So you can't have anything more than 6 inches. And that's basically if I cut a 6-inch in diameter circle, you can do 6, but you can't do anything more than 6, right? So I shouldn't be able to fit anything bigger than that in this little corner of my stair tread. So assuming I have my decking on, basically it's just, it wants to make sure that this rail is, down against the stair enough that something, small child, an animal, whatever might be on your deck can't like fall out of your stairs here. Otherwise, the railing's not really doing its job. So that's basically what that one's checking for. And then this last one, this is a 3-foot landing for stairs. So what that means is, let's say I have a really tall deck and I'm gonna, do stairs that wrap around the corner of my house. And so I have one stringer here, and then I'm gonna build a landing and change directions. Basically, this is saying that you need a 3-foot landing. So I can't just have, 0 room to turn around. I need 3 feet in this section before I make a turn. And this also applies for the end of your stairs, like meeting the ground. I think this is only if it's like an exit point from your house. So like the porches or decks that we do at our Habitat affiliate, they are just off of the front and the back door, which are both required exits for the house. So we also need this 3-foot landing, which in our case is a concrete pad. But you have to have 3 feet from where your stairs end coming out. So that's another code. Hopefully that makes sense. I also put a link to our code here, just if you want to check out some of the differences for local things, but this is all from like the International Building Code. So this stuff is consistent all the way through. Okay, so I put in a couple questions just that I came up with as I was going through stuff, which we already went through the permitting in a little bit more detail. But then another one that I get is, how close to the property line can I go? This I will also defer to your local codes because, some cities or even neighborhood associations have like setback rules from property for anything like sheds, fences, decks. So you will have to make sure, but basically what I found pretty consistently is 10 feet from the back of your house and 5 foot from the sides. So, if this is where my property line ends, I can't build my deck all the way to that line. I need to make sure I'm 5 foot off of it or 10 foot off of it. And then I also put in a bunch of resources that I found along the way. So some, articles about, estimating building materials, a couple videos that I thought were helpful for how to build a deck. And this goes into some more specifics on the actual building, which is a little bit hard to do virtually, I'm not gonna lie. This was the video of the guy saying what not to do. He was a little bit harsh, but he had a lot of good critiques about things that were done wrong. Here's that video about the stairs that I showed you or referred to. And then this article I thought was really, really helpful for kind of breaking down how to look at and think about the code and where to refer to. So the charts and stuff that I sent you, that's directly from the code. So it's all accurate and it's all necessary, but it is a little bit hard to kind of wrap your head around. So I thought this article was a good kind of in between. And then I know I'm kind of at that 8:30 mark. I wasn't sure how long this was going to be. I do have, you know, this slide and a couple more on deck maintenance. So everybody's welcome to stick around. If not, we are recording the presentation, so you can watch the end of it at another time if you do need to run. But I'm going to keep rolling if that's okay, Tracy. And then
Yeah, let's try to wrap it up in the next maybe 5-10 at the most.
Yeah,
We try to really do try to keep these under an hour. So
yep, it's not too much longer. So this, I just wanted to go briefly through the wood versus synthetic, and basically it's sort of a preference thing and how much money you want to invest at the time. So I kind of put the cost of stuff down here, and then a few articles that also go more into it. But pressure treated wood is going to be your most common, and you can find it everywhere, right? The synthetic is going to last longer over time, and it's lower maintenance. So you don't have to stain it, you don't have to pressure wash it, you don't need to do anything like that. But it is more expensive, and you are more limited in your color options. So that's kind of the gist of it. And like I said, you can look at these articles for more info. And then just briefly hitting on our deck maintenance. So best thing you can be doing for your decks is inspecting it. So if you can figure out where damage is happening and figure it out right away, then you can figure out what you need to do to address it. So, you know, one thing might be replacing deck boards. So I put a couple pictures of some of those, you know, warps that we can find. That could be splintering, cupping, like this picture with the nails popping out. All of that is stuff that you can fix by either replacing the deck board or adding some screws in, pulling out all these old nails. That would also work. And then you can also clean your deck, right? Especially if it's a wood deck, maintaining that finish and making sure you don't have a bunch of mold and mildew growing on it. That's going to make sure your deck lasts a lot longer. So I put a link to some cleaner that you can use. And then as well as, you know, should you use a pressure washer or not? And I thought this was a really helpful resource. But basically, the thing with a pressure washer is it's great for taking off, you know, dirt and grime and mildew and stuff, but it can also damage our wood if we're not using it properly. So we don't want to be splintering into our wood and actually taking away pieces of our wood as we go. So you want to make sure you're using it correctly, and also only if you need to. So if you can just get away with a little bit of elbow grease and you're doing this on a regular basis, you don't really have a need to pressure wash the heck out of your deck. Okay. And then I put a little bit on here about staining and sanding your deck and sealing it. So basically, the stain and seal is a great way to protect your wood for longer amounts of time. So when we first do a new deck, we do want to allow it the 60 to 90 days to weather. So we're going to let it, you know, do its expanding and contracting a little bit, settle into its environment. Then we can put a coat of stain, give it that style finish that we want, and also help protect it from water. So, you know, we want to redo this every couple of years, and you can also do a water drop test. So if I drop some water on it and it's not soaking into the wood, then I know my seal is doing the job that it's meant to do. If it's soaking up completely, then I'm going to need to redo that. And in order to properly redo staining your deck, that means you also need to start with a good surface. So I'm going to take off the old stain, which you can do with like a stripper or a cleaner, and you get off all those strips, and I'm going to sand it, which is going to help me get the wood to a state where it can really soak up that stain and soak up that seal. And so I put a few different sanders down here. Orbital sander right here. That's great for covering, you know, a large surface area of deck at a time. And then this other sander has this triangle on it, and that's great for getting into corners. So make sure you keep a lookout for which one of those you should be using. I think this is basically it, Tracy. So other things that you can do to help maintain your deck for the long run, basically we don't want any buildup of leaves or debris on our deck. So this is going to trap moisture on our deck. It's going to cause discoloration. It's going to cause molding and rotting of my deck boards. So I want to make sure I'm doing that, sweeping it off, blowing it off on a regular basis. Same thing with any kind of porch furniture. If I have rugs or tubs or anything that's sitting on it for a long time, this is also going to cause discoloration and potentially hold water on your deck. And then also any kind of bushes or trees that are, we never want those in contact with our roof, our house, our deck, any of that. So we want to make sure stuff like this, we're trimming away on a regular basis, like once a year when, you know, it's time to trim your plants. Go ahead and pull these off of your deck so it's not causing any of those issues. And then one other idea that I put in here is if you are doing your deck over again, or you want to go back and retroactively do this, you can put some weed blocker under your deck, cover that with some gravel, and that's going to make sure you don't have a lot of like grass or weeds coming up under your deck boards, which can be really a nuisance to get rid of. And this way you don't have to use any harsh chemicals in the environment, right? I think that's mostly all. Sorry if that was kind of a lot of information. Still working through this one. So yeah, please, if you have questions, go ahead and chat them or share them.
So as to Paula's question there about porches, pretty much everything you've covered for the decks would cover a porch built the same way, correct?
Yeah, so the only really difference with porches is basically you would also have a roof over it, which I didn't want to get into the roof framing of everything, but basically, you know, when we figure out our floor system, at this point you can put posts going upright that could lead into your porch, right? So that's how my porch is. Or if you have a short enough deck height off of the ground, you can use the same post that's going on your footing all the way up and just build your floor system to it and then build your roof over top of it. So that's really the only thing that changes. Wherever you have a porch like this, all of the deck concepts that we covered are still in place. So hopefully that helps answer that question a little bit. Okay. Any other questions, feel free. Please put in comments, feedback in this. If we come back to this topic, anything you guys say will help us tailor it to better serve Women Build members of the future. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. I think that's all I got, Tracy.
Okay, great. Thanks, Caitie. And so Caitie, you were going to revise one photo or something?
Yeah, I'm going to flip that photo that had it backwards from what I was saying. So
okay.
I'll do that and resend it to you.
Great. So as soon as she sends me that revision, I'll get it out to you guys. It'll be sometime tomorrow anyway. We have to edit down the video, but you'll get a link with the presentation and with the video recording. So you can follow along and go out and build your own deck. Thanks so much, Caitie. Thanks everybody for being with us tonight.
Thanks everybody.
All right. Have a good night.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.